Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Happy New Year. Around the mid-20th century, the contemporary Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai wrote the following: "You can't show weakness, and you have to be tanned. But sometimes I feel like the white veils of people who faint at weddings or at Yom Kippur. You can't show weakness, and you have to make a list of the things that you can pile on a child's stroller now that it is empty of children. The situation right now is if I take the plug out of the bath after the tub, if I open the drain, I feel that all of Jerusalem and with it the whole world might empty out into great darkness. By day, I lay traps for my memories, and at night, I work in Bilam's factories, changing curses to blessings and blessings to curses. And you can't show weakness. Sometimes I collapse into myself without people even noticing. I'm like a walking ambulance, carrying the patient inside of me to a no-aid station. And as the sirens blare, people think it's normal speech. The thing is, the whole paradigm of the cedar tree and the reed is cast against the backdrop of the storm. Whether you are holding or embodying or projecting the cedar or the reed, either way, it's the storm in this metaphor. We've been playing with this image from the Israelites, from the Talmud in Masechet Ta'anit, about paradigms of strength and resilience, about turning curses into blessings. And that famous one from Bilam, hired to curse the Israelites, and how out of his mouth he opens his mouth, and what comes out? Well, it's blessing. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. That was supposed to have been a curse. And then there's this guy, Achia Hashiloni, from the book of 1 Kings, who says that the Israelites are again cursed. And again, the rabbis, though, this time turned that into a blessing. The piece from Ta'anit talks about the Israelites being blessed with the strength of the mighty cedar. Achia curses them that they should be flimsy like the reed. And the rabbis say, no, that's actually a blessing because the reed is flexible. It can be cut and it regrows its shoots. It grows deep roots underneath the water and the ground. And that it can be blown this way and that in the midst of the storm. And so now, thinking about the cedar tree and the reed image, consider the way that we project ourselves and the stories we tell about ourselves. We try to affect a certain kind of strength externally, so perhaps in Yehuda Amichai's telling, at the worst, people don't see us for the way that we are on our worst days, that the normal speech might actually be a real cry for help. Actually, as it turns out, that's a big theme throughout the entirety of the liturgy of the high holidays. We get to this whole thing, you heard it at Slichot, you're going to hear plenty more of it, Slach Lanu. It's Slach Lanu and not Slach Li. Why not Li, me? Why is it Lanu, us? Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, nu, us. It's all first person, but it's plural, it's collective. And I think that's because of what Amichai is making reference to here. It's a paradigm of what it means to hurt, to own personal struggle. Imagine if we individually had the wherewithal to say that I'm hurting sometimes, to turn it softly over and over again in your pocket, like car keys or some loose change. And here's the thing. I don't actually think that we aren't capable of holding that kind of struggle. Look at this whole day and this whole trajectory into Yom Kippur. We're supposed to lay our souls bare and say, I don't have it. I mean, we do actually say it in Avinu Malkeinu, Ki ein banu ma'asim. We talked about it earlier. Help us with this. Give me a hand with this, because I don't have it. And I think that the answer to this, that struggle of putting one foot in front of the other, of wrestling with the pieces that are broken and trying to show a bit of strength when we might not be feeling it, can be found in the midst of some of what it is we say and will be turning and returning to today. Amichai says, you can't show weakness. He's using the image of somebody fainting at a wedding or at Yom Kippur, but where is he day by day? In the fourth line of that poem, by day I lay traps for my memories, and at night I work in Bilam's factories, turning curses to blessing and blessing into curse. This, for those of you keeping score, is the same Bilam from Sefer Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, charged by Balak with cursing the Israelites, and when he opens his mouth, out comes Matovu. And Amichai, in his incredible and poetic way, imagines there is a factory for this, in point of fact. But by day, Amichai is setting traps for his own memories. What does that mean, to lay a trap for your own memories? What, like a bear trap or something? Are you negating your memories? Are you containing them? What's the actual move here? What are you doing? What is the poet doing? The move is working, in fact, in Bilam's curses and blessings factory overnight. And this is the thing. The thing of Bilam, and the thing of Achia Hashiloni, and the thing of the poet Yehuda Amichai. You can actually change the curse into a blessing sometimes, depending on the story that you tell yourself about it. Or in short, how it is you remember it. Think of it this way. Remembered differently, the most wonderful day in your entire life that happened, well, now if you remember it as a curse, it's the best thing that'll ever happen. It's the high water mark, and nothing will ever be as good. Or conversely, that terrible, miserable thing, remembered differently, maybe it's adversity building character, or maybe it is a low water mark. I managed to take a step beyond that terrible thing. I can navigate whatever the storm may bring ahead. It's that matter of remembering it and reading yourself in different ways into the experience. So the heavy lifting here on Rosh Hashanah, in terms of how it is that we remember what we remember, well, isn't that great? In the Musaf service, check it out. We have Malchuyot, Shofarot, and Zichronot. Whoever said that, thank you. I didn't pay any money to that person. That was totally... Zichronot are memories. You can check it out on page 315 if you want. Check out the first three memories. First, we get a chunk of Noah's Ark and some slavery in Egypt. In fact, none of this on the face of it would really seem to be anything that we'd really recommend, or that we like, or that was pleasant or good. But look at what it focuses on. God remembered us. Number two, God remembering us from parts of Tehillim, from Psalms. What were the Psalms? Well, there's a range of possibility here. I'm going to go with one of the traditional readings and renderings that a lot of psalm authorship is attributed to King David himself at a time when he's not yet king. And King Shaul has an evil notion or some kind of an evil spirit racking his brain. And King Shaul, Saul, is doing everything that he can to skewer David with a spear. And Psalm 106 makes specific reference, in fact, to Pinchas, the one who shish kebabs corrupt priests with another spear. We've got a lot of spearing of human beings here as a theme. It's not exactly pleasant. And yet the pieces we extract in the Machzor from the Zichronot verses, God remembers us. That's the Zichronot part, not the slavery or the God destroying everything in the flood or the shish kebabbing people with a spear. God remembering us. God remembering the covenant and God forgiving the people because of kindness. And lastly, you get this proclamation for the prophet to go to Jerusalem. How did that go for them, the people, or the prophets? Well, you saw something of a little bit of an exception to the rule throughout the prophecies of Jeremiah, Isaiah, in the Haftarah today, that one of coming back with love. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not most of it. Most of it, the prophets were pretty extreme, and then everything gets destroyed. And it's your fault. And yet, it says here, even when I rebuke my child, I remember my child with love, thus saith the Lord. Again, we're taking real misery and transforming it on some level with this act of zichronot that undergirds this entire Rosh Hashanah enterprise. So here's finding the strength of the cedar and the resilience of the reed through memory. It's how you remember. If you break that word down, it means you re-keep, you retain, you bear those things in your memory. I want to share something. I had a memory of reading this at one point. I couldn't remember from where. So I went and looked it up, and I found a Reuters article about it from 2015, an analysis of flashbulb memory that stipulates that the more you consciously attempt to remember a thing or a specific moment in time, the more you actually distort it in your own brain. Has anyone ever heard of this before? Josh has. Thank you, Josh. That idea that by actively trying to recall something, to bring it to your mind, to your memory, you're tweaking it a little bit. Every time you actively remember a memory, it's further away from what actually happened. This is theorized to be because we seek to create narratives around memory. And so what happens is that every time we remember something, we re-keep it, retain it, it changes a little bit by virtue of what of ourselves we bring to the memory. The story that we're telling about the thing that we're remembering without even realizing the story. How we incorporate and process information. Maybe that little factoid feels a little depressing if you've been carrying around a precious memory of something you can't revisit. But on the flip side, I also think of myself as an awkward middle schooler. Who here was an awkward middle schooler? Thank you. I'm glad I wasn't alone. I remember somewhere in the years of 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, I remember lying awake at night sometimes and thinking, man, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. Whatever the dumb or awkward or uncomfortable thing was, I wish I hadn't done that. And put differently, sometimes we have to remember in a way that helps us reconcile a memory. This is what Amichai is talking about, and this is what allows me and maybe some of you to live with whatever awkwardness you bear from 5th, 6th, 7th grade. Amichai says, in the day I lay traps for my memories, and at night I work at Bilam's factories, changing curses to blessings and blessings to curses. When Amichai says he's trapping his memories, he's capturing them and bringing them to the factory. In other words, he's rendering the best ones a little bit lesser and the worst ones a little bit better. He's smoothing out that trajectory of memory, making the whole thing a little bit more palatable and a little bit more livable, giving us, rather than the extremes of what we might remember, a middle way. That's what I think Zichronot is actually about. A lot of Jewish history, not great. As the Israeli author Chaim Chazaz once said about the act of remembering, Eini mechabed ha'historia ha'yehudit. I don't respect Jewish history. Ani mitnaged. I'm opposed to it. He continued on. Jewish history is boring. It has no adventures, no conquering heroes, no great rulers or potentates. All it has is a mob of beaten, groaning, weeping, begging Jews. And you'll agree with me that there's nothing interesting about that. And if it were up to me, I wouldn't allow our children to be taught Jewish history at all. I would simply say to them, look, little children, we don't have any history, and we haven't had one since the day we went into exile. Class dismissed. Go out and play now. He actually wrote this. It's a great short story. And it's an incredible glib shot that Chazaz takes at the very notion of Jewish history that we together remember. But I don't buy his line. I don't buy what Chaim Chazaz offers in the sermon. It's that what it's actually called. The Sermon is the name of that story. I can't go as far as Chazaz in dispensing with and dismissing history and our collective story. But I don't have to, as it turns out. Because I have Bilam's curse that turns into a blessing. I have the rabbis who remember Achia's curse and turn it into a blessing. You're a wimpy little reed, he says. And they say, that's actually a good thing. It allows us to be flexible and not rigid, humble, not arrogant, resilient, not delicate. And I think that is a valence to what undergirds and lifts us up in Zichronot. Why uplift a bunch of terrible memories alongside God's sovereignty and the majesty of shofar? Why not go the Chaim Chazaz route? We'll just cut it. We'll skip it next year, right? But no. It's how we temper the good and the splendor of the good, the blessing of the good, with the horror of the bad. It's how we have integrated stories that we can tell ourselves that are neither subsumed by the extremes of blessing nor the terrible of curse. It's why Amichai sits around trapping those memories by day, plugging them into the curse transformer at night. I think it's ultimately why we say we, us, over and over again, because the enterprise of actually bearing perfect witness to the thing might be too painful. So we kind of need each other and one another to have a measure of the softness that comes. You can't perfectly retain the best from last year, but neither is God interested in you being perfectly cursed by it either. It's only through this act in the factory that reimagines curse into blessing, blessing into curse, that we find new ground, that we can find a middle way and something that is solid and stable enough on which we can build tomorrow. So Achia, the Shiloni, he curses us to be like weak little reeds. Here's the power of my ancestors, our ancestors. They weren't slayers of dragons. They weren't King Arthur or Achilles. But they did render curses into blessings. It is not a quick and easy process. It's not a process that's done day by day. In fact, if you look at the generational project, it's done over, rather than a year, the centuries and the millennia. I'm not capable of remembering the worst that I've ever done or the worst that I've ever lived as a blessing. But that, I think, is the challenge that's posed to us in this place. If we ask to be remembered, re-kept, retained by God in the book of life, we're actually invited to be partners in the reimagining, the retelling, and the remembering. We're invited to pull up a chair at the Bilam Curse and Blessing Factory ourselves. It behooves us to pay attention and to think about how we remember and the stories that we will tell of ourselves over the coming year of making anew and making holy. Shana Tova. Yeah.